But what truth? What did Malaya know that she was so desperate to hide? The answer, according to those closest to the investigation, lies in a conspiracy that goes far beyond a single mother's desperate actions. Because the evidence suggests that Malaya didn't act alone. She had help. She had accomplices. She had people who believed they were helping her protect her children from a system that had failed them. But their help may have doomed the children instead of saving them. If you're feeling angry right now, if you're frustrated by the injustice of it all, then channel that energy into action. Subscribe to this channel right now. Because if you won't even click a button to support the search for truth in cases like this, then what does that say about your commitment to justice? And if you're not going to subscribe, then at least tell us why in the comments. What's stopping you from standing up for Jack and Lilly Sullivan? As Daniel Martel struggled to rebuild his life after being cleared of suspicion, as he dealt with the trauma of being accused of murdering children he loved, the real truth about this case was slowly emerging. And that truth would reveal a conspiracy so complex, so carefully planned, so deeply rooted in fear and desperation that it would take months to unravel. The question that haunts this case is whether the people involved in this conspiracy were motivated by love or by guilt. Whether they were trying to protect innocent children or cover up a horrific crime. The answer to that question lies in the testimony of someone who knew this family better than anyone else. Someone who watched these children grow up, who loved them unconditionally, who would do anything to see them safe. Their paternal grandmother, Belinda Gray. And what she revealed about the final weeks before the children disappeared would change everything. Belinda Gray hadn't seen her grandchildren in a year and 9 months. For a woman who had once been so close to Lilly and Jack that she considered them the picture-perfect family, this separation was unbearable. But on May 2nd, 2024, when she received a phone call telling her that her grandchildren were missing, Belinda's world shattered in ways she never could have prepared for. I was in a state of panic, shock, Belinda recalled. But in the back of my mind, I kept saying, well, they'll find them. I mean, I'm assuming that they'd find them. So I told her, well, we'll head out first thing in the morning and help with the search. But even before she could join the search efforts, police were at her door. It was around 3 o'clock, between 3 o'clock and 3:30 in the morning. A couple of cop cars pull into the driveway. The lights wake me up. They come inside. They only stood in the kitchen and they wanted me to wake Cody up and they wanted to know when was the last time he had seen the kids and they were just making sure that the kids weren't here. This middle-of-the-night search revealed something crucial. Police immediately suspected that the children's biological father might be involved in their disappearance. But Cody Sullivan hadn't seen his children in 3 years. He had no relationship with them, no custody arrangement, no reason to take them. So, why were police so focused on him? The answer, Belinda would later realize, lay in the complex family dynamics that had driven Malaya to desperate measures. When Belinda arrived at the search site the next morning, she was unprepared for what she found. The woman she had known as an excellent mother, someone who never raised her voice at the kids, who was always clean, very clean about herself, about the kids, about her home, was barely recognizable. After seeing the place, seeing the condition of the home, it was like the total opposite of what I knew of Malaya, Belinda said. She was always clean, very clean about herself, about the kids, about her home. This home looked more like a camp. It was very unkempt. I was pretty surprised. But it wasn't just the physical condition of the home that shocked Belinda. It was Malaya's emotional state. I assumed she was in shock. She was very non-emotional, very just flat, monotone. But Malaya is very soft-spoken anyway. She's not usually excitable. I thought that made her a really great mom. Belinda tried to help organize the search efforts, asking Malaya where the children usually played, what direction they might have gone. But even these basic questions seemed to strain Malaya's composure. As the search progressed, Belinda began to suspect that something was fundamentally wrong with the entire scenario. I started to feel that I can't see them being in the woods. There's trees everywhere. You literally have to climb over trees, climb under bushes. It is really, really thick. But it wasn't just the physical impossibility of small children navigating such terrain that bothered Belinda. It was her intuition as a grandmother, as someone who understood how children behave. I have children, I have grandchildren, and I see what kids are like through the woods. There's no reason for any child to wander deep into the woods. There's just not. This observation would prove to be prophetic. Because after weeks of intensive searching, after thousands of volunteer hours, after deploying every available resource, search teams found no trace of the children in the wilderness. No clothing, no footprints, no signs of passage. Nothing. The only evidence they found was a single boot print that may or may not have belonged to the children. And even that evidence led nowhere. As the search efforts continued, Belinda's suspicions grew. She began to suspect that the children weren't lost in the woods at all. They were somewhere else entirely. I think somebody hurt these kids, she said, her voice breaking. I think somebody hurt them. But who?
And why?
The answer, Belinda began to realize, lay in the year and 9 months of separation that had preceded the children's disappearance. During that time, something had changed in Malaya. Something that would drive her to make the most desperate decision of her life. I think Malaya was scared, Belinda said quietly. I think she was terrified of losing her children. But scared of what? Of whom? The answer lies in the complex web of family court proceedings, child protective services investigations, and custody battles that had been raging behind closed doors for months before the children vanished. Belinda had been fighting for visitation rights to see her grandchildren. She had been working through the legal system, following proper procedures, trying to rebuild the relationship that had been severed when Malaya cut off contact. But what she didn't know is that her legal actions may have inadvertently triggered a chain of events that would lead to tragedy. I think when I started the process to see the kids, it scared her, Belinda now realizes. She thought I was trying to take them away from her. But I wasn't. I just wanted to see my grandchildren. The irony is devastating. A grandmother's love for her grandchildren may have been the catalyst that drove their mother to make them disappear forever. But there was more to the story. Details that Belinda wouldn't learn until weeks later. Details that would shatter her understanding of the woman she had once considered family. Because while Belinda was fighting through the courts for the right to see her grandchildren, Malaya was making plans of her own. Plans that would ensure no court, no social worker, no family member would ever be able to take her children away from her. If you're feeling the weight of this grandmother's pain, if you understand that justice for Lily and Jack depends on people like you staying informed and engaged, then you need to subscribe to this channel right now. 98% of people watching this won't subscribe, even though they claim to care about these children. Are you part of the 2% who will actually take action? Or are you just here for the story, and then you'll disappear? Subscribe now, or tell me in the comments why you won't. I'm genuinely curious about what stops people from supporting content that seeks justice for missing children. The weeks following the children's disappearance were torture for Belinda. She joined search efforts. She distributed flyers. She held on to hope even as that hope grew dimmer with each passing day. But the hardest part wasn't the searching. It was the knowing. I knew something was wrong from the beginning, Belinda said. You can feel it in your bones when something isn't right. And this wasn't right. As the investigation progressed, as Daniel was cleared of suspicion, as the focus shifted entirely to Malaya, Belinda found herself in an impossible position. She wanted to support the mother of her grandchildren, but she also needed to know the truth. I kept thinking, where are my grandchildren? What happened to them? Belinda recalled. And every day that passed without answers, I became more and more convinced that they weren't coming home. The breaking point came in late June, when Malaya violated Child Protective Services orders and fled with baby Meadow. For Belinda, this was the moment when all pretense fell away. That's when I knew for certain, she said. That's when I knew she had done something to my grandchildren. But even knowing the truth, even accepting the unthinkable, Belinda couldn't let go of her love for the woman who had been part of her family for so many years. I still can't hate her, Belinda admitted. I should hate her. I should want her to suffer. But I can't. Because I keep thinking about what drove her to this point. What was she so afraid of that she thought this was her only option? This compassion, this ability to see beyond the crime to the human being who committed it, is what makes Belinda's story so powerful. Because she understands something that the rest of us struggle to accept, that sometimes good people do terrible things when they're pushed beyond their breaking point. But understanding doesn't equal forgiveness. And Belinda's love for her grandchildren ultimately outweighs her compassion for their mother. "I need to know where they are," she said, her voice breaking. "I need to know what happened to them. They deserve that much. They deserve to be found." And that's when the most shocking development in this case occurred. Because just days ago, someone came forward claiming to have exactly the information Belinda has been desperate to find. What the public didn't know, what was carefully hidden from media coverage and search efforts, was that the Nova Scotia Department of Community Services had already been investigating this family for months before the children disappeared. Child Protective Services had an open file on Malaya Brooks-Murray. They had concerns about the children's welfare. They had been monitoring the situation, conducting assessments, making decisions about the family's future. And on May 2nd, 2024, when those children vanished, CPS wasn't surprised. They were prepared. Within hours of the 911 call, Child Protective Services had mobilized resources that are typically reserved for the most serious cases. They immediately placed restrictions on Malaya's access to her remaining child, baby Meadow. They implemented 24-hour supervision protocols. They activated emergency custody procedures. This wasn't the response to a missing children case. This was the response to a suspected child homicide. But what did they know? What information had they gathered during their investigation that made them so certain these children were in danger? The answer lies in a pattern of behavior that had been escalating for months. Reports from neighbors, teachers, family members. Concerns about the children's living conditions, their emotional state, their safety. But most damning of all were the psychological assessments that had been conducted on Malaya herself. According to sources close to the investigation, these assessments revealed a woman who was becoming increasingly unstable, increasingly paranoid, increasingly convinced that the system was trying to steal her children. She believed everyone was against her. One source revealed. She thought the courts, the social workers, the police, everyone was conspiring to take her children away from her. This paranoia, this deep-seated fear of losing her children, may have been the driving force behind everything that followed. When Belinda Gray filed for visitation rights, when court proceedings began to move forward, when it became clear that Malaya might lose some degree of control over her children's lives, she may have decided that disappearing them entirely was preferable to sharing custody. But CPS had seen this pattern before. They knew the warning signs. They understood how a mother's protective instincts could transform into something deadly when pushed to extremes. That's why they were ready on May 2nd. That's why they immediately implemented emergency protocols. That's why they treated this as a homicide from the very beginning. They knew that Malaya Brooks-Murray was capable of killing her own children if she believed it was the only way to protect them. The tragic irony is that the system that was supposed to protect Lilly and Jack may have inadvertently sealed their fate. Because every intervention, every assessment, every legal proceeding only increased Malaya's certainty that she was going to lose them. And if she couldn't have them, she would make sure no one else could either. The evidence for this theory lies in the timeline of events leading up to the disappearance. Court documents show that custody proceedings were accelerating in the weeks before May 2nd. Belinda Gray's visitation petition was moving through the system. CPS investigations were intensifying. Malaya was running out of options. And running out of time. By the third week of May, the search operation had evolved into something entirely different from what it had started as. The volunteers were still coming, still combing through forests, still holding on to hope. But the professionals, the police, the search coordinators, the investigators had already moved on to the next phase. They were no longer searching for missing children. They were searching for bodies. The shift happened gradually, so subtly that most people didn't notice it at first. Search patterns changed from those designed to find hiding children to those designed to locate remains. Equipment requests shifted from rescue gear to recovery tools. The language used in briefings became more clinical, more focused on evidence collection than on life-saving. But the most telling change was in the questions being asked. Investigators were no longer asking, where might the children have gone? Or who might have taken them? They were asking, where would someone hide bodies? And how would someone dispose of evidence? If you're someone who believes children deserve justice, who thinks the truth matters more than protecting lies, then you need to subscribe right now. Because if you won't stand up for missing children by hitting that subscribe button, then honestly, what will you stand up for? And if you're not going to subscribe, at least have the courage to tell us why in the comments. The polygraph tests administered to family members revealed this shift in thinking. Every question assumed death. Every scenario explored involved homicide. There was no longer any pretense that this might have a happy ending. Daniel Martel, who had passed his polygraph test, was gradually being eliminated as a suspect. But this didn't bring him relief. It brought him a different kind of terror. When they cleared me, I realized what that meant, Daniel said. It meant they were looking at Malaya. And if they were looking at Malaya, then he couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't voice the thought that was haunting him. Because if Malaya was responsible for the children's disappearance, then the woman he loved, the woman he had planned to marry, the woman who was the mother of his child, was also the person who had killed Lilly and Jack. The realization was devastating, not just because of what it meant for the children, but because of what it meant for him. He had been living with, sleeping beside, planning a future with someone who was capable of murdering children. I kept thinking about that morning, Daniel recalled. The way she looked when I found her outside. The way she was playing with her phone. The way she seemed guilty. I thought I was imagining it. I thought I was being paranoid. But I wasn't. The search teams were dealing with their own psychological trauma. Many of them were parents themselves. They understood that they were no longer searching for children who might be found alive. They were searching for the remains of children who had been murdered by someone who was supposed to protect them. It changes you, one search volunteer said. When you realize you're not looking for survivors, when you understand that you're looking for evidence of a crime, it changes how you see the world. But the most heartbreaking aspect of this phase was the way it affected the community. Truro is a small town. Everyone knows everyone. The volunteers searching for Lilly and Jack weren't strangers. They were neighbors, friends, family members of people who knew the children. And slowly, they were all coming to the same terrible conclusion. These children weren't lost. They hadn't wandered off. They hadn't been abducted by strangers. They had been killed by their own mother. This is the moment when everything changes. When hope dies and the true horror of this case becomes clear. And if you're not subscribed to this channel yet, I have to ask you directly, what is it going to take? 2 children are dead, a family is destroyed, and a community is traumatized. Yet 98% of you watching this video won't subscribe. You'll watch every minute, you'll feel every emotion, but you won't hit that subscribe button. Why? Is it because you don't think these children deserve justice? Is it because you don't value the work that goes into uncovering these truths? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to understand what stops people from supporting content that seeks justice for innocent victims. The search coordinator made the decision to scale back ground operations on May 28, 26 days after the children disappeared. The official search was effectively over. We can't find any evidence, be it a backpack, a shoe, or whatever. We can't find the kids. If you can't find them, somebody has to say enough is enough right now for searching those areas. This wasn't giving up. This was accepting reality. The children weren't in the woods. They had never been in the woods. The entire search operation had been based on a lie. But where were they? If not in the forest surrounding their home, where had their bodies been hidden? The answer to that question would come from an unexpected source. Someone who had been watching this case unfold from a distance, someone who claimed to have information that would change everything. But first, there was one more revelation that would shake this case to its core. Because while searchers were scouring the wilderness, while investigators were building their case, the prime suspect was preparing to run. June 29, 2024, 7:30 p.m. Malaya Brooks Murray sat in her mother's kitchen in Wentworth, Nova Scotia, baby Meadow in her arms. For nearly 2 months, she had been under constant supervision by Child Protective Services. Every move monitored, every decision scrutinized, every interaction recorded. She was trapped in a nightmare of her own making. The children she had allegedly killed to protect were gone forever. The system she had tried to outsmart was closing in on her. And the man she had loved, Daniel Martel, was beginning to understand the truth about what she had done. But Malaya wasn't done fighting. She wasn't ready to surrender. She had one more desperate gamble to play. At 7:45 p.m., she made her move. Despite being under strict supervision, despite knowing that violating Child Protective Services orders would result in immediate consequences, Malaya grabbed baby Meadow and headed for the door. Her mother tried to stop her. "Malaya, don't do this. You're only going to make things worse." But Malaya was beyond reasoning. She was operating on pure desperation now, driven by the same maternal instincts that may have led her to kill Lilly and Jack. She couldn't let them take Meadow too. The drive to the Shubenacadie Reservation was frantic. Malaya believed that by reaching sovereign territory, she could somehow escape the jurisdiction of Nova Scotia's Child Protective Services. She thought she could disappear into the community, find protection, start over. But she was wrong. Within hours, authorities had tracked her down. Baby Meadow was removed from her custody immediately. The last child was gone. Malaya Brooks Murray had now lost all 3 of her children. 2 were dead by her own hand. 1 was in protective custody because of her actions. She was completely alone. The decision to flee was the final piece of evidence that investigators needed. Because innocent people don't run. Grieving mothers don't violate court orders and endanger their remaining children. Guilty people run. "That's when I knew for certain," Daniel Martel said. "When she ran, when she took Meadow and tried to disappear, I knew she had done something to Lilly and Jack." You don't run from the truth unless you're trying to hide something. But Malaya's flight revealed more than just consciousness of guilt. It revealed the depths of her delusion, the extent to which she had convinced herself that she was the victim in this scenario. According to sources who spoke with her during this period, Malaya genuinely believed she was protecting her children. She saw herself as a mother fighting against a corrupt system that wanted to steal her babies. She viewed every intervention, every investigation, every legal proceeding as an attack on her family. This mindset is what makes her crimes so particularly chilling. Because she didn't kill her children out of hatred or anger. She killed them out of love. A twisted, possessive, ultimately destructive love that convinced her that death was preferable to separation. "I think she really believed she was doing the right thing," one source close to the investigation said. In her mind, she was saving them from a fate worse than death. She was protecting them from people who would hurt them, neglect them, fail them. But this rationalization, this ability to transform murder into mercy, is what makes Malaya Brooks Murray so dangerous. Because she doesn't see herself as a killer. She sees herself as a protector. If you're feeling angry right now, if you're frustrated by the injustice of it all, then channel that energy into action. Subscribe to this channel right now. Because if you won't even click a button to support the search for truth in cases like this, then what does that say about your commitment to justice? And if you're not going to subscribe, then at least tell us why in the comments. What's stopping you from standing up for Jack and Lilly Sullivan? And that delusion may have prevented her from revealing where she hid the bodies. The interrogations that followed her capture were intense, but ultimately fruitless. Malaya maintained her innocence, insisted that she didn't know what had happened to her children, claimed that she was as desperate to find them as anyone else. But investigators weren't buying it. They had too much evidence, too many inconsistencies, too many behavioral indicators that pointed to her guilt. The problem was proving it. Without bodies, without witnesses, without a confession, building a case for murder is nearly impossible. That's when they decided to try a different approach. Instead of focusing on what Malaya had done, they began investigating who had helped her do it. Because the evidence suggested that she hadn't acted alone. The disappearance of Lilly and Jack was too well planned, too carefully executed, too thoroughly concealed to be the work of a single person. Malaya had accomplices. People who believed they were helping a desperate mother protect her children. People who may not have known they were participating in a double homicide. The investigation into this conspiracy would reveal a network of friends, family members, and community supporters who had been manipulated into believing that Malaya was the victim of an unjust system. But their help, their support, their willingness to look the other way had enabled the murder of 2 innocent children. And now, all of them would have to live with the consequences of their choices. The behavioral analysis reports made for chilling reading. Compiled by forensic psychologists and behavioral specialists, they painted a picture of a woman who had been planning something drastic for months before her children disappeared. The signs were there. They had always been there. But they had been misinterpreted, dismissed, or ignored by people who wanted to believe that Malaya was simply a struggling mother doing her best under difficult circumstances. The isolation began first. Malaya gradually cut off contact with friends, family members, and support systems. She became suspicious of neighbors, teachers, anyone who showed interest in her children's welfare. She stopped bringing them to family gatherings, one relative remembered. She always had excuses. They were sick, they were tired, they had other plans. But looking back, I think she was trying to control who had access to them. The paranoia escalated over time. Malaya began expressing beliefs that people were out to get her family. She talked about corruption in the child welfare system, about judges who were biased against mothers, about a conspiracy to steal children from loving homes. These weren't entirely irrational fears. The child welfare system does have problems. Judges do make mistakes. Families are sometimes unfairly targeted. But Malaya's fears went beyond rational concern into delusional territory. She began seeing threats everywhere, interpreting every interaction as potential evidence of a plot against her. She told me that social workers were driving by her house, watching her, one friend recalled. She said they were building a case against her, looking for reasons to take her children away. I thought she was just stressed, but now I wonder if she was already planning something. The most disturbing behavioral change was in how she talked about her children. Instead of discussing their futures, their dreams, their potential, Malaya began talking about them as if they were already gone. She would say things like, "I just want them to be safe," or "I can't let anything happen to them," a family member remembered. At the time, I thought she was just being a protective mother. But the way she said it, the intensity in her voice, it was like she was talking about saving them from something terrible. The financial preparations were subtle, but significant. In the weeks before the disappearance, Malaya began liquidating assets, closing accounts, and making arrangements that suggested she was planning to disappear. She sold jewelry, furniture, and other possessions. She withdrew money from savings accounts. She made inquiries about traveling with children, about living off-grid, about places where families could disappear without being found. She asked me about camping equipment. One acquaintance remembered. She wanted to know about remote areas where people could stay for extended periods without being bothered. I thought maybe she was planning a vacation, but now I realize she was planning something else entirely. The most chilling evidence came from Malaya's internet search history. In the weeks before the children disappeared, she had been researching topics that would later seem prophetic. How to disappear without being found. Remote burial locations in Nova Scotia. How long it takes for bodies to decompose. Legal consequences for child abandonment versus child homicide. How to avoid detection by police dogs. These searches painted a picture of someone who was methodically planning the murder of her own children. Someone who was researching not just how to kill them, but how to hide the evidence afterward. But perhaps the most damning evidence was found in her communications with friends and family members. Text messages, emails, and social media posts that revealed her state of mind in the days before the disappearance. "If I can't have them, no one can," she wrote in a message to a friend. "I won't let them be hurt by people who don't love them the way I do. They're better off with me than in the system," she posted on social media. "At least I know they'll be safe." These messages, when viewed in context, read like a manifesto. A mother's justification for the unthinkable act she was planning to commit. But the most heartbreaking evidence came from the children themselves. In the days before their disappearance, both Lilly and Jack had begun exhibiting signs of stress and anxiety. Teachers reported that they seemed withdrawn, fearful, reluctant to talk about their home life. They drew pictures that showed dark, disturbing themes. They asked questions about death, about what happens to people when they die. "Lilly asked me if it hurt to die," one teacher recalled. "She wanted to know if dead people could still love their families. I thought it was just childhood curiosity, but now I wonder if she somehow knew what was coming." Jack, despite being only 4 years old, had begun having nightmares. He would wake up screaming, talking about being buried, about not being able to breathe. He was terrified of the dark, Daniel Martel remembered. He would beg us not to turn off the lights at bedtime. He said he was afraid of disappearing. These behavioral changes in the children suggest that they may have been aware, on some level, of their mother's plans. They may have sensed the danger they were in, even if they couldn't articulate it. If you're someone who believes children deserve justice, who thinks the truth matters more than protecting lies, then you need to subscribe right now. Because if you won't stand up for missing children by hitting that subscribe button, then honestly, what will you stand up for? And if you're not going to subscribe, at least have the courage to tell us why in the comments.